don't you?
We will talk about that next time.
Okay.
We're talking
I know you
about
believe
something
it.
else.
That's okay.
All right.
Well, good.
How about this? In the Noah story, you said that you believe that the plants, some of them, they die, or did they die, or was everything killed on Earth when he was in the?
Well, it says very clearly in the story in Genesis 6, 7, and 8, if you read it, that everything on in whose nostrils was the breath of life perished. Plants don't have nostrils, nor do they have the breath of life.
Okay.
Are plants alive is a question we could argue about. In the biblical sense, I don't think so. They're not considered alive. In our modern scientific classification, we've decided plants are in the living category. But there's something different about plants and animals. I think everybody would agree with that. Something different, intrinsically different.
It also says, and every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground.
So you're thinking that includes plants?
Living substance? That sounds totally different than living animal. Would you say that if you were
Good point. I think plants, we see it all the time now. Some plants survive a flood just fine.
But how would they survive over a year underneath water?
Why do you think they're underwater for a year?
That's what it says.
No, it doesn't. It says Noah was in the ark for a year, but
he landed. The flood was a year.
Well, no, Noah was in the ark for a year.
And the flood was a year.
No, he was in the ark for 7 days before the flood even started.
And it was over a month. It was like a year and a month long, or 400 days or something.
No, Nolan, he was in the ark for a year and a month. That does not.
My bad. Then let's say it was 270 days.
No, he hit bottom. The ark landed, hit bottom, stopped moving in the 7th month. But it took 5 more months for the water to go down.
Yes.
Parts of the earth might have only been covered up for a few weeks.
How?
You don't know.
How have they only been covered for a few weeks?
If the crust of the earth is broken up like an eggshell, like obviously it is, there are fault lines all over the place. If the crust of the earth was broken up during Noah's flood, which I think it was, the fountains of the deep broke open, water under the crust shot up, broke the earth up like an eggshell, and those plates are still flexing up and down today. The Himalaya, Mount Everest is, 15 feet taller now than it was when they first measured it, or something like that. It's still growing. The Himalayan plate is lifting. Who cares? Okay. Some plates are sinking down. So I think the crust of the earth is still flexing up and down, but during Noah's flood, it would have been more radical. So I don't think you could prove plants had to survive a year, because you're confusing. Noah's in the ark for a year. Some part of Alabama was only underground for 3 weeks and 2 days.
All right. So,
and I completely made up that number. But
yeah. Okay. For instance, let's. Okay. It says that the mountains and the high hills were covered, right?
Correct.
So there had to be mountains before the flood. Mountains are thousands of feet tall. Okay?
Well, who's defining mountain?
Absolutely. Look up a definition of a mountain.
Oh, and you want me to take a modern dictionary? Look up a modern person.
So you're saying that, okay, so a mountain was only 300 feet tall? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't answer. I didn't say that. I'm just saying you're wanting to put some modern classification.
And it says it landed on the mountains of Ararat, which means they had to have known about those beforehand, or did the person write and name them that later and then wrote that?
Well, the ark could have landed in the mountain range that later they called the mountains of Ararat, because the flood is back here, and Moses wrote the story 1,000 years later. He might have said, just like I would say, the Indians used to live in Conecuh County, Alabama. But there was no Conecuh County, Alabama when they lived here.
But that isn't what you say. What you would say, what is now Conecuh County. That's how you say it.
Correct. There was no Alabama when they lived here.
Let's say it was only 1,000 feet deep. Okay? And let's say that was enough to flood everything. How could something not be flooded a month later? Because water seeks its own level.
I agree.
You know how much flexing and dropping down would have to happen for that? That would be such a large number. I mean, an earthquake, if it's 10 feet, if something drops 10 feet, that's that's
chaos.
So 1,000 feet or something, it would have to be more than that, because it would have to be enough to dump enough water to where that water is gone, and then to where something would only be flooded for a second. But you also said that there would be tidal waves like 200 feet tall or something over and over. So it would keep getting hit with things over and over and over. Do you think this is conducive to growing plants?
Well, I think that's why people died if they weren't on that ark. Everything outside died, animals and plants. Most of the plants. Now, Plants can survive either through floating in log mats. I mean, this happens all the time. And there are floods in like the Amazon Valley or in the Congo River Valley where it'll flood for months. Huge trees, they just float around. And then when the water goes down, they reroot.
So what about the olive branch that was found
You keep changing stories.
No, but we're talking about plants. If a plant survived,
sure.
There was no plant to be found the first time. 7 days later, Dove comes back with an olive branch.
I know. See, there was an olive tree that was growing in that region that was only underwater for a couple of weeks, and the rest of it was fine. And so the dove found that one.
Ah, okay. And then gotcha.
No, you don't got me. Now listen, let me explain to you. The oceans today, you can Google it, average 12,000 feet deep.
Yes.
That's the average depth of the oceans. 70% of this planet right now is underwater.
Absolutely.
Okay. 30% is above water. We call it landmass. Okay. The average height of all the land masses in the world is 2,500 feet, I believe, or 2,300, around 2,000 feet. So if the continents average 2,000 feet high and the oceans average 12,000 feet deep, 5 times more than the average height of the continent, all you got to do is adjust the crust of the Earth. A 1 mile change spread out over 1,000 miles is 0.1%.
But it would have to be across the whole thing for the not to be flooded, and that wouldn't have killed everything.
If you smooth out the Earth right now, just smooth it all out, it's 8,000 feet of water everywhere, completely covered. That's almost.
Don't you think there was more land mass before the flood?
Yeah, the water was in the crust of the Earth. It says in Genesis 1,
so
the water was in the.
Do you think it was more land or more ocean before the flood?
Much more land. I'm just wildly guessing. 90% land before the flood.
Then why are 95% of all fossils we find marine?
Well, because everything was able to multiply rapidly. The oceans were filled with creatures. Today, marine life
but billions, crinoids and all that?
Nolan, marine life only fills a small part of the ocean. There are huge sections of the ocean with almost nothing living there. They call them deserts.
But if it was small, if it was such a small amount and it wasn't so deep, okay, that they couldn't have lived, there wouldn't have been enough food for everything.
Well, then maybe my 90%, 10% is wrong. It should be more like 85, 15. I don't know what it was before the flood, but the oceans were big enough to have all the animals that we're currently finding as fossils. How's that?
But then why wouldn't there be more fossils found of the animals, the vertebrates and all that?
Well, animals, creatures that are capable of escaping a flood to run to high ground for even a short time are more likely to end up on top of the sediments rather than in the sediments.
But they got buried, right? I thought everything was buried a mile deep.
No, some were buried mile deep, and we do find lots of fossils. The Karoo Formation has 800 million of them, vertebrate fossils.
And they all lived on Earth before.
Yeah, all at the same time.
Just
the fruiting capacity of the planet was incredible. That original creation could supply a lot more animals per square mile than we can today. So any farmer will tell you, good farmland in some areas can hold 20 cows per acre. Other areas of South Dakota takes 20 acres per cow.
Do animals we consider prey or herbivores today have defense mechanisms against carnivores or the predators?
I think they had they use them today for defense mechanisms, but like horns on a cow, those are great for clearing grass off or moving. They use horns for all sorts of things. Besides,
what about the insect that looks like a leaf, though? Why would it?
Well, I think also the horns. Probably the mama cow thinks that looks cool, so she's.
But why the insect that looks like a leaf, or the one that looks like a stick, or the camouflage ones? That seems like they're trying to hide from predators.
It seems amazing to me that anybody can believe that came from a rock.
That's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm asking if everything were vegetarian, why would something need to? You're telling me that since the flood, an insect was able to make a leaf, and
I think you got a couple of false assumptions here. You're assuming that insects are included in the animal kingdom.
It says that they ate plants, not so insects.
But if insects, same thing with fish. They might have eaten other fish because the command was given for those whose nostrils on land. So I don't know that insects would be
by
classified.
birds and by other things.
Yeah. What if insects were classified as a complex, self-replicating food source?
That's not the definition of an insect. An insect is an animal.
No, that's the Hovind definition.
Well, it's wrong.
Insects are insects.
I could give definitions for anything then, and if we're going to just go by that and then win every argument.
Right. So the insects were created to be a food source, and so they needed camouflage to hide from other predators.
And
even though don't some plants have defense mechanisms, or don't some plants? They're plants. They're designed to be eaten. Anyway,
and that's why they have them. And then what about
our time is up. You asked me to present a creation view, and you said you would refute it.
Yes.
Have you refuted what I taught, that they used to live to be 900? There was a flood, and the Earth is 6,000 years old.
Yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
One more, if I can.
Sure.
When it has to do with dating, and that's it.
Sure.
Okay. Let me get to the thing I have on it. Okay, you talk about radiometric dating and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you know about amino acid dating?
I have read some on that. I think that's dating of anything is obviously based on some assumptions that we know that this rate has been consistent. We know that there's all kinds of things that affect the rate of decay of all sorts of these things.
But not of radiometric stuff.
Yeah.
You can't change the rate.
They're calling me. Time's up here. Bring that up for the next one. But if you want to schedule another debate or discussion.
Yeah, we will. And I'll have to explain all the dating, because there's about 30 different types of datings that they do, and they cross-check them.
Yeah, blind dating.
That too. Of course, double